Hi guys, welcome to this week's Reclassified here on Ickonic.com. This week we'll be building upon again all the information that we've covered in the last 3 or 4 reclassifieds. This week I want to speak about the Tower of Babel fable, rhymes, and what it means to transhumanism, and maybe the lesson that we're trying to teach us in the Tower of Babel. You know, I'm not a religious person myself, but I think there's a lot to learn from these religious texts, especially in the allegories and mythologies around them. So the Tower of Babel one, and also the Garden of Eden, when eating from the tree of knowledge, of good and evil, that sort of thing of what your kind of boundaries as a human being should be. And obviously that will go over to transhumanism, what they're trying to do today and what may happen, the warnings that they were given in the biblical text about the Tower of Babel. It's a fantastic story. It's not very long really in the actual biblical texts, but the lesson learned from it I think is applicable to what they're trying to do today, this techno cult that's surrounding the Messiah Trump at the moment, unfortunately, and the tech guys from Silicon Valley and all the DARPA guys there, Google, you know, Elon Musk and these fellas. They are prodding and building their own Tower of Babel, and it's really interesting to see how the mythologies and also the secret societies kind of fold into this in terms of language and signs and symbology. So we'll be having a look at that today. So the best place to start off would be to read the chapter from the Tower of Babel from the biblical texts. So this is Genesis 11, New International Version, and this is the Tower of Babel. So 11. And 11 is a massive number, 9/11, and Aleister Crowley will be getting to later as well why he kind of designated number 11 to himself. All of these things tie in because they have their own language, numerology, shapes, signs, and we've gone into colours before as well. But Tower of Babel. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Make a name for ourselves is really important there. They want to make an image, an idol for themselves. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." And this is really important as to why I think that the language, although separated here, carried on in other ways. "Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." So therefore they're not able to build anything and communicate. And 8. So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, or Babel, obviously because children babble, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So we see there that they were building this technology to reach the heavens. They wanted to become as gods. And in this terms of the transhumanism, which is, you know, the new version of eugenics, it's about usurping God, becoming gods themselves. And that's what this whole black nobility led cult are doing. They believe themselves to be able to become gods, immortal gods, and that is absolutely through the likes of Hollywood and all of these places. So that's the story of the Tower of Babel. So the main component of that story, the lesson there, well, one of the lessons is don't try and be God. But the other lesson is that they will stop this, or God would stop this by confusing the language. I believe this language carried on in other ways, and I'll show you what I believe and my theory is now. But the person that seemed to be behind the building of the Tower of Babel seems to be Nimrod. Nimrod is another version, some believe, of the god Onassis. It's the fish hat, the mitre fish hat that you see the Catholic Church wearing. They still worship these guys because this is the Church of Babylon, and this is this occult, inverted Church of Babylon, and that's what the Vatican seems to be, and that's why he wears his little fish hat with his stick. But the language that keeps going, I believe, is in signs and symbolism. So the old Hermetic principles. I've covered some of these before, and we'll cover them a little bit in here. But that's how they communicate to each other, through signs and symbols and colours and dates. Dates are massive. So there is a language that they're still using to build their own Tower of Babel, which is now transhumanism. And they'll have their own, temple, which will be Solomon's temple there. Well, they'll put all this stuff through, but they've been warned not to try and usurp God. You can see what they're doing now with nanobots and technology, and trying to change the nature of humanity back to what they believe what it was during the golden age of Saturn, which was it was an androgynous being. That's why the whole transgender agenda is being pushed as well. They're being used as well. But let's have a look at this. So this is the star of Remfam, and it's a Masonic symbol. Now there's Then there's people argue about whether this is the Star of Remfan and the Star of David, and whether they're the same thing. I believe they are, because it actually connects back in. But you can see the two stars there. The star there with the two triangles. You've got G in the middle. Some people think it means God in Freemasonic areas. Some people think it means geometry. There's many others that think other things. But you've got the key component there is the fact that the symbol is there, so above as below. You've got the two triangles, which is the Trinity. So you've got the polarities of left and right, and in the middle is the neutral at the top there, pulls the left and right together into the Trinity, and that's the triangle. So the triangle upwards is the Trinity. Then obviously the triangle downwards is the inversion of that. Now what this has done, this symbol here, it layers heaven over earth, so above as below. And we've seen in the Solomon's temple what these bad guys want to do with their temple. They call it a gateway between heaven and earth. They want to overlay heaven and earth into one, because this is all about collapsing this back in to the 0 point of nothing and resetting it and starting again, which we'll be having a look at later. So that's the Star of David. Obviously, that's on the Israel flag. You have the red version, which is the Rothschild's seal on their door. The blue version is the Shekinah protected Star of Israel, with the two stripes being the rivers there, which is the protection of Shekinah being water. And we covered that in a previous episode. But this is obviously the symbol that most of us will actually know. And obviously you've got 666 there with the triangles themselves. But this is the Star of David, still of Solomon possibly, and the Star of Remfan. So who was this Remfan guy? So the reason I think the Star of Remfan and the Star of David are the same thing, other than they look the same, it does say in the biblical text, it doesn't say Star of Remfan, it seems to say idol. So there's people out there that believe that that means a statue. But when you look at the identity of Remfan, it's identified with Saturn, and we all know that the Star of David can be folded in to the sigil of Saturn and back into the cube of Saturn. That's the point. So I do believe they represent the same thing. So scholars and several Bible dictionaries identify Remfan as the name given to the Babylonian god associated with Saturn, so Kronos. The Babylonians worshipped a god called Cian, spelled Choyun, so Chirun, in some biblical dictionaries, named after the wandering star, Chian. So it's clear there that Remfan is Saturn. Now, and then you look at the Star of David, that is clearly the sigil of Saturn, and that goes inside the cube of Saturn. And we have an image here of how all of this stuff fits together. So you can see there the Star of David going inside as a cube inside the middle of the Star of David and a hexagram. You see the cube going around the outside. So you're basically shapes within shapes that are the same. And you see the Freemasonic, obviously, square and compass there as all part of it. The sigil of Saturn is on the Balmoral crest. And they're connected to that. You can see it in 911, the numbers of 911 I've covered before, Roman numerals for IXXI, which is the sigil of Saturn. So all of these have a vibrational and electrical charge to them, both positive and negative to them. It depends how you use them. But the inversion of the triangle is the heaven on earth, and it's the layering over of the two, which I believe is representing a portal between this world and the other. Or they believe it anyway. I believe they believe it, if that makes sense. So they are trying to create a portal into another world. They're trying to become gods, and they're trying to usurp God. And that's the whole story. That's the whole lesson to learn in the Tower of Babel, that if they try and do that, something bad's going to happen. Now, it seems to be that one of the original bad things that happened were the floods, the flood of Noah or Gilgamesh, which it seems to be more originally Gilgamesh, and there's thousands, there's many flood stories out there, but Noah's the most popular one, obviously, most well-known one. But that definitely factors in that something cataclysmic will happen if they try and be gods, and maybe that's what they're trying to bring about on purpose. So here is a quote from the Bible about Rampham, and let's just have a look at who this guy was. So Acts 7:4-3, those numbers are important as well. So you took up the tent of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, the images that you made to worship, and I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. So you made idols of this guy, and I will send you into exile into Babylon. You have taken up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, the idols you made to worship, therefore I will send you into exile beyond Babylon. So this Remphan is Saturn, obviously, and it's a Saturn cult. Saturnalia is Christmas as well, and that'll come into what we're talking about later as well. So this Remphan god guy seems to be Saturn. The star of Remphan is the seal of it. Well, it corresponds with the sigil of Saturn, therefore it would correspond with Remphan, and that obviously is the same symbol as the Star of David. So they do correspond, and I don't think there's any way round saying that they do correspond. Whether officially the star of Remphan or not, it corresponds with Saturn, and Saturn is Remphan, so it's clearly there. This was really interesting. I didn't know this till doing the research for this week's show. King David's name in ancient Hebrew is Da-wa-da. Now, this was really interesting to me, because obviously you've got Da-wa-da means door added together to another door. So you've got two doors there. So the name David itself in ancient Hebrew appears to be a portal. Door added together with another door. Two doors meeting. So that appears to be that. But when you've got Da as well, is the triangle, and if you invert the Da, it's not going to be heaven you're going to, is it? It's going to be hell. Get down. And then obviously if you place them over each other, the Da of the start of David, which is the upturned triangle, and the Da inverted at the end, because Da is David, but invert that second triangle to place over the top of each other, you get the Star of David or Remphan. So it seems to be like symbolically within the name David itself, and obviously these people believe they are the lineage of David and Noah and all of these guys. So the inversion of that second Da wouldn't be up, would it? It would be down. So you're getting heaven and earth meeting together, crossing over, and the Da means door, so that's door-to-door salesman. Possibly where that comes from. And I just found that really, really interesting. I didn't know that until recently, or until this week. Da is David in ancient Hebrew, which means door-to-door, basically, which to me means portal. So here's another version of it. So as above, so below. You've got there the two triangles, and together they make the Star of David. And the hexagram in the middle, which is obviously, if you kind of squint your eyes and do the magic eye trick there, you get a cube, which is the cube of Saturn. And the six-pointed star is obviously 666. So it's all there for people to see. A lot of people won't want to see that, but it is there. So this is the Hermetic Science of Emotion and Number. I've been reading this lately at the kind of suggestion of my good friend Wayne McCroy, who's done some fantastic work, and I'm a big supporter of what he does, because he's one of the very few that looks into the alchemical and hermetic symbology of what we're looking at here. The fact that these have a vibrational effect on the human consciousness and the world. And these people know this, and that's what I was saying before, is that though God confused the language, they created their own language for the mystery schools, which is Hermeticism, which is signs, symbols, colours, dates, and that's why they use them, because they're communicating to each other, believing they're empowering these numbers, and you'll see how later on. So they have their own language. They weren't confused. We were confused, the people that weren't in the mystery schools, but their language carried on, and it's that language they're using to rebuild their Tower of Babel, which is transhumanism, and they want to become gods. So they're repeating this madness again. So we covered this in a recent reclassified, but I just want to go over this quickly again. So the similarities and dissimilarities between electrical field and magnetic field. So you've got two fields there. And what, I don't know if you've noticed this, and I didn't notice this till recently, is that when you look at the Matrix films, what colour are the pills that they give you? It's red pill or blue pill, isn't it? Red pills to wake up, blue pills go to sleep. But they're the same, they're different energies controlled by the same system at the peak, which is the Trinity. So you've got the magnetic field and you've got the electric field, and they're the other way round, and they repel each other, so they're going that way. So that's why we have the red and blue polarities of politics. And where do you go to vote? You go to the polling station. Once you start to see this language here, you understand how they're communicating each other. They're using the red and blue of Republican and Democrat against each other, and same here in the UK, to push us apart, away from each other, and strenuate our common ability to communicate with each other and see what these guys are doing, because at the very top they're controlling both elements. And we've seen that in the US just now, and I keep banging on about it, but Donald Trump was funded by Peter Thiel. In his previous campaign, J.D. Vance, the vice president now, was funded by Peter Thiel this time, so it's basically the same thing. And Eric Schmidt was funding Harris, and Eric Schmidt, Peter Thiel are together in America's Frontier Fund, founding that, because they all work together, because you're looking at technocrats that are controlling both sides of this, because this is the transhumanist agenda, and this is the language they speak. They understand the nature of reality, or they think they do, by any chance. And I do believe there's a lot to this, and this is how they communicate with each other. And that's really fascinating. Another thing you find out in that book I mentioned just a minute ago, the Hermetic Science book, the Hermetic Sciences of Motion and Number, is that the crucifix is a replica of this. Replica is not the word. It's a symbol of this. So what it is it's the female aspect is the top part, the blue part that goes left to right, and the red would be the cross that comes up and through. Now the original crosses used to be a T shape. They weren't up through the top, which could symbolize going, beyond God. I don't know, but that's why the cross is that way. So you've got the electrical male energy penetrating through the female energy that crosses over that way, and that's like, it signifies birth, creation. So when they hung Jesus, if you believe that story to be true, or anyone, on that cross, what they were signifying was that person should never have been born. They were undoing their creation. They were basically just deleting them out, resetting them, if you will, out of the system. And that's what the cross symbolizes in Hermetic terms, in these secret occult terms. So when you have Elon Musk wearing his, Mars god Abaddon costume, and he's got an inverted cross, that means basically the inversion of humans. He's turning us upside down, topsy-turvy world, which we'll come to later, because that ties into another thing. So another version of the polarities was obviously the Twin Towers, which is also obviously the number 11 as well. You had the third tower there, which would be the gate of Apollo, all three together. But the Twin Towers are the sun and moon, left and right, and there's the red and blue there. As been saying, is Boaz and Yakin as well. From Freemasonry and Solomon's Temple, that's why they want to rebuild that. That's going over the rainbow and into a new world. I covered that a few weeks ago. But again, I know I repeat myself in these shows, but you have to start putting all these bits together. I mean, I do anyway, if I lose my mind. But you have to kind of start putting these bits together, and as you do, you need to go back and forth and go, oh, that fits in there, because this is a system. They understand the nature of reality, and by understanding this language, we can dismantle their new Tower of Babel. That's as simple as what this is. So I am learning this new language as we go, and you're learning with me, and I'm sure I'll get some things wrong, but it's quite clear that this is the language you need to point out to people for them to learn, to see what's about to happen to them. Then you can warn them and go, these guys are going to do this on this date. These guys are trying to do that. You had Donald Trump only last week talking about this being a new golden age. Well, if you don't know what that means, it just sounds nice, but it's not. It's the golden age of Saturn. You had also even Elon Musk coming out and talking about Nouveau Order Seclorum, which obviously is a new order of the ages, and he just put it on Twitter because they don't care anymore. There was a point, David talks about this, David Icke talks about this, that there is a point where they have to come out of the shadows and do it out in the open, and we are at that point. So again, polling station is a place where you go to vote, but you're not really voting for anything because you're just using your energy up. They're dividing your energy, or our energy together, collective energy, and just stretching it out and just basically collapsing it in on each other with us having a go at each other about candidates that they control both sides of, because it's hermetic. They know exactly what they're doing. So the number 11 I mentioned there with the Twin Towers. So this is another crucial element. Aleister Crowley was obsessed with the number 11. And obviously we have 9/11. And we know why that was part of the sigil of Saturn, and all of these things, how they kind of interrelate it, we've covered. But number 11 was it's a Kabbalistic, because these occultists are following the Lurianic Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah goes way back before even Jewish mysticism. But it is because the principles of it, again, with all of this mysticism, doesn't mean they're bad. Again, everything comes with the everything comes. You can use this information for good or bad, but there is a difference between good and bad, and that's what is really important. I want to get across actually right now is that these lunatics are trying to invert good or bad, or they're saying everything is good. So even if you do evil, and he said this, Aleister Crowley said about this as well. He mentioned it in "Do What Thou Wilt" is the whole of the law, and love is the law. I never remember the whole thing, but basically everything is love. Well, it's not, because love and hate are different. They're different energies. You can't do evil in the world and expect good, God. You evil and good are separate energies. They're going in different directions. So you can't get to a good place by doing evil. That's absurd. But that's what these guys believe, that if they do enough evil, their God will come in and just clear it all up and reset it. So in the end, they're doing good. That's absurd. But that's the way they've convinced themselves that they're doing a good deed for humanity. So the number 11 means in the Tree of Life, which is Kabbalah, the sphere of Darth Vader. In the Hebraic language, Darth means knowledge or abyss, being the Sephirah located in the limit between the superior triad, it's the top three, Kether, Yokem, and Binah, and the Sephiroth located at the more manifested world. Darth is where takes place a phenomenon usually known as the Black Night of the Soul, where the adept stands at the mental state represented by the diamond or demon, Coronozon, so I would assume that possibly has a link to Kronos, past the state of the mind in essential to reach the consecration of the great work. The great work is what they call transhumanism. The great work is to overhaul God. It's to usurp God. That's the great work of the Freemasons or the Knights Templar at its very, very top level. That's what it is. That's what their great work is. To reach Darth is necessary first to take contact with the holy guardian angel who conducts the adept and helps him to reach the abyss safely. To me, it looks like he's going on. They're going on about. So this is from Philema as well. So this is the cult of Crowley. This is them talking about going between one world and another. I believe that seems to be what it's about. The number also has the symbolism of the union of the macrocosm and the microcosm and the macrocosm. Yeah, exactly. The folding over of two together. It's the bringing in together, like the circle is, and we'll cover that later, what the circle is, and the difference between the circle and the dot and the Ouroboros. As the sum of the 5 and the 6, being 5 related to the pentagram and 6 related to the hexagram. So 11 joins the meaning of both the correlations and means the all. So that's why Aleister Crowley said my number is number 11 and associated himself with the number 11 and the power that he believed that it had. This guy says, pulp non-fiction. Ever wonder what all the 11s and 11 or 1111 posts are about and where it came from? From the Book of the Law, Aleister Crowley. My number is 11 and all their numbers who are of us. if you start seeing this number everywhere, you're being contacted by the Golden Dawn. I don't believe that you're being contacted by the Golden Dawn. I believe that they're just putting it out there. But the Golden Dawn, again, the dawn of a new age, a golden age. Donald Trump's just said this. This is the cult that they're part of. This is all the same cult. So this is the Book of the Law, the actual quote from Aleister Crowley. My number is 11, as all their numbers who are of us. The 5-pointed star with a circle in the middle, and the circle is red. Red again, which is Yahweh. My colour is black to the blind, but the blue and gold are seen of the seeing, which is blue and gold, I believe, to me, from what I understand. The blue is the Shekinah protection of the gold underneath, which would be the Ark of the Covenant and the monatomic gold. So the blue's protecting the gold. So the blue protects the secrets, basically. Also, I have a secret glory for them that love me. So he knew exactly what he was doing with these esoteric principles. Now, again, we don't have to believe these things actually work. This is the way they communicate with each other. So let's go back to the Tower of Babel when he divided the language. But there was a secret language there that these guys communicate with. And that's how they're building this transhumanist agenda in the background. Now, Donald Trump here, Trump promises golden age for America in victory speech. Of course he does. But unfortunately, all these people that are following Trump, who's part of a messianic sect, don't understand what he means by golden age. And he means the golden age of Saturn. And that's exactly what they mean. It's the great work of all of these people. Now, this was really fascinating, and I didn't know this till recently. It was Wayne McCroy that mentioned this in one of his podcasts. He's got a great podcast out there that's about 9/11, and this was fascinating to me. This is just another example of how they use dates and times to push an agenda. And they do things on certain dates. So once you understand the dates, times, and what these mean, you can see how you're being set up. Obviously, a lot of Trump supporters were set up to go into the Capitol or Capitol Hill, which is obviously from Rome and near the Temple of Saturn. They were set up to go in there. They were led in there, Pied Pipered into there. And this night on the 6th of January is known as the Feast of Fools. Also known as the Feast of Fools, 12th night marked the end of the first festival period and in echoes of the ancient Roman midwinter festival of Saturnalia, which is Christmas, in which a social order was reversed. Social order was reversed. It gave everyone the chance to dispense with normal conventions, and that is the point. So the Feast of Fools, originally it seemed to be on the 1st of January, but it got moved to the 6th, which was the 12th night, which is the 12th night after Christmas. And then the 12th night play, the Shakespeare play that was commissioned as well about this. So on the 12th night, which was the 6th, that's when the Capitol riots happened, because this was the Feast of Fools. They were laughing at all of their supporters. Trump was laughing at the supporters. It was the time when social order was inverted. It gave everyone the chance to dispense with normal conventions. Exactly. So they were tapping into these esoteric understandings. And none of these guys that went there had a clue about this. And maybe, I don't know if Alex Jones and these guys have a clue about this stuff or not. You'd have to ask them. But, if I know it. The 18th century heaped confusion over the date of the 12th night. There has always been some uncertainty about it, as depending on whether or not December the 5th, 25th or 26th is considered to be the first day of Christmas. So they'll argue over this stuff, but it doesn't matter what we think, it matters what they think. 12th night can be the January the 5th, the eve of Epiphany, or the 12th day, January the 6th, which marks the coming of the Magi. So they were marking the coming of the Magi, which had been Trump. This is all esoteric occultism. This is what they're doing, and they're doing it to people through numbers, and they're signifying to each other through numbers, dates, themes, signs, language. That is their language. Signs and colours and sound. The shift to the Gregorian calendar and the subsequent loss of 11 days complicated matters, as it meant that the old Christmas day became the 12th night. So much so that there's some celebrated old 12th night on January the 17th. However, today most regard 12th night to be the evening of January the 6th, and the day in which, according to superstition, all decorations must be removed. So it's the end of that Saturnalia festival, and it's the marking of the Magi, and it's when everything is reversed and inverted. And it's also called Topsy Turvy Day, which I quite liked, and that possibly comes into the Alice in Wonderland speech, where she talks about everything being what it wasn't and everything that what was isn't. I can never remember the whole thing. I'll put it up on the screen. So that could go into there. Topsy Turvy Day is celebrated on January the 6th every year, and also known as the Feast of Fools. Again, this is what it was. Everybody rushing into that Capitoline Hill. They were taking part in the Feast of Fools, and they had no idea. It is a large festival celebrated in the middle of Paris, but the date is now January the 6th, not the 1st. And yes, the day is celebrated with a special cake, which comes with a little favour inside for luck, and a crown for the person is king for the day, having found the favour in this slice of cake. The Glatai de l'Ickonic is the name of the cake. So, again, this is what they do. And once you can understand this stuff, you can see how you're being used and you can warn others. This is Elon Musk with Novus Ordo Seclorum on the back of his jacket there. And this is him putting this out only on the November the 7th. So very recently, Novus Ordo Seclorum with his son there. And Donald Trump. It's a new order of the ages. They're telling you. They've come out. They know their game is up. They know their time is up. So they are coming out and just saying it now. And eventually people will just go... Because people are like looking at that and going, who would call out Musk for being a transhumanist lunatic of what he is. And they're going, oh no, it's just fun, innit? The guy's a lunatic. These are two lunatics there, messianic lunatics. He's in Washington applauding Netanyahu. Trump just recently said Netanyahu's doing a good job. They're all part of this messianic sect, and the transhumanist part is their Tower of Babel, that they're building. Now, this was really interesting. Queen Elizabeth II's coffin leaves Balmoral and begins a final journey. What's the date? September the 11th. Of course it is, because it's the sigil of Saturn. Again, it's just another example of how they sign to each other. They're very specific about dates and times. I'm sure the 9:23 a.m. has something. I haven't worked that bit out yet. But 2022 is obviously 6. So September the 11th, she left Balmoral, and Balmoral has the sigil of Saturn on its crest. People gather in tribute as the cortege carrying the coffin of the late Queen Elizabeth II passes by in Banchory, United Kingdom. The second there could be the Twin Towers, I suppose, if you really wanted to look at that. But and then this was really interesting. If you think you can't geoengineer the weather, what's the chances of 2 rainbows coming out, going above Buckingham Palace as people mourn the Queen's death? The 2 rainbows are symbolic of the Noahide laws and God's promise not to flood the world again. And then this is where I'm tying things in here, because I think they think that God can't destroy them, the line of David, Noah, and that's what these black nobility bloodlines believe they are, because he's made a promise and a covenant with them, and that's symbolised by the rainbow and the double rainbow. So in the book Genesis, chapter 9, we are told of the covenant God made with Noah and with every living creature after the great flood. They don't believe it's every living creature. They believe it's the lineage of Noah. The Lord set the rainbow in the sky as a sign of the covenant, a symbol of his promise that never again would the waters cover the entire earth. And God declared that this sign of the rainbow in the sky would be a reminder of God's promise. There's absolutely no way they didn't geoengineer those 2 rainbows. So the second rainbow, the second fainter rainbow, would be a reinforcement of the covenant, a visual affirmation that the Lord's word is unbreakable and his commitment to us is eternal. But that's not us, me and you. This is to this bloodline who believe they're descendants from Noah. Truly, the appearance of a double rainbow is a breathtaking reminder of the unwavering nature of God's promise, inspiring us to place our faith and trust in the one who spoke the universe into existence. Now, these guys want to reset and usurp God, but they believe they've got a covenant with God that he can't go back on his word. So therefore, they can take advantage of that. So I think that they believe that when they do this transhumanism, this time, They can't have a replacement. They can't have a repeat of the Tower of Babel incident because God's made a promise and he can't break his promises. They can. The 7 Noahide laws. So these are the 7 Noahide laws that you'll be living by if these lunatics get their way, and this is what's represented by the rainbow. Idolatry. That just means you don't worship their God. They get to make up what these things mean. Blessing the divine name, so that'd be their God. Murder. Well, if they don't, see you as human, is it murder? Sexual transgression. They'll get to make up what that is. Theft and civil law. Well, if they own everything, then you're a thief every time you take something of theirs. Court systems they will control, and eating a limb torn from a live animal. Not sure why that one's in there. That's what the Noahide laws are about. It's a promise to this cult, that they believe anyway, a promise to this cult that they won't be destroyed if they, and they're thinking, okay, we'll try this again, this transhumanist agenda, the Tower of Babel, and they won't be destroyed. Interpreting the Tower of Babel story. So let's get back to just quickly recapping the Tower of Babel story in terms of Yahweh. The famous Tower of Babel story and how it was built is about much more than an ill-fated construction project and language confusion. It is at the heart of the Old Testament worldview. Babylon was where people sought to make a name for themselves, become gods, by building a tower that reached to the heavens and the realm of the gods. The city is cast as the source of sinister activity and knowledge. So this is Genesis 11:1-9. Now that can't be missed on you. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words, and as the people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there, and they said to each other, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and they had tar for mortar. And he said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. They wanted to become gods, lest we be scattered over the whole face of the earth. Then Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that humankind was building, and Yahweh said, behold, they are of one people, one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. So now nothing that they intend to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down. No one's figured out who us is. If he's God, who's he with? His mates. Let us go down and confuse their language there, so they will not understand each other's language. And as again, I'll repeat myself again, is that the language they confused was the verbal language, but the sign symbologies and everything carried on clearly, as we're seeing now. So now let's come up to the present day of transhumanism. The likes of Ray Kurzweil, Elon Musk, and all these technocrats, especially around Trump at the moment, are pushing their new Tower of Babel, transhumanism, to usurp God. This is what Ray Kurzweil had to say. What happens to entities as they evolve? We become more intelligent. We become more capable of higher level emotions, so we become more loving. This is from a person that is doing the inversion of all this, obviously. We become more creative, we become more beautiful. And so we're actually moving exponentially to have greater levels of the very properties we ascribe to God without limit. They want to become gods. Now he says that we can become more God-like. The whole idea about this is to softly get people to accept the transhumanist agenda, which is the inversion of being everything that's human about you will be deleted, literally. Control-Alt-Delete. In December 2012, Google hired Kurzweil in a full-time position to work on new projects involving machine learning and language processing. Google founder Larry Page personally hired him. Page and Kurzweil agreed on a one-sentence job description. They just basically make it up as they go along. And the fact is, it's a cult, so it doesn't really matter what title you put on there. To bring natural language understanding to Google. Kurzweil received a technical Grammy Award on February the 8th. Of course they do, because they're all rituals. 2015, specifically for his invention of the Kurzweil K250. So he's deeply involved with Google. Google is DARPA and ARPA, and it's it's the central hub to all this data collection and getting us all online. We all know that. The Google futurist talks nanobots and avatars, deep fakes and elections, and why he's so optimistic about a future where we merge with computers. There we go again. This is Ray Kurzweil again. The American computer scientist and techno optimist Ray Kurzweil is a long-serving authority, he's not, on artificial intelligence. His best-selling book, 2005, The Singularity is Near, sparked imaginations with sci-fi-like predictions that computers would reach human-level intelligence by 2029, and that we would merge with computers and become superhuman around 2045, which he called the singularity. So they're talking about this one mind, this one singularity, back down to the singular. They're not talking about we're all going to be one or all going to love each other. They're going to be, you are one of mind, communism, and we will tell you what to do and control you. That's what it's about, connecting you. Musk and Google. So, and the key takeaways. SpaceX has signed a deal with Google Cloud to use the tech giant's massive cloud infrastructure. Now, Elon Musk is banging on about like the dangers of Google and going against Google with his own search engine whilst being funded by these guys. It's ridiculous. It's the polarities again, controlling the red and the blue. It's all theatre. Key takeaways. SpaceX has signed a deal with Google Cloud to use the tech giant's massive cloud infrastructure for a Starlink satellite internet project. Although many details of the deal are confidential, including what the deal is worth, we do know that the partnership could go on to last 7 years. The 7 is important. Again, it's the Sabbath. It's the last year before the world to come, which is the 8th year. This is what they do. They put the keys and terminology in there because they think it empowers what they're doing. So the 7 is important there. All the dates are. SpaceX plans to use Google's data center as a massive network of private fiber optic cables. So it's not private. It's not at all. Cables to provide high-speed broadband internet around the world. Starlink has already launched its beta program in parts of the United Kingdom, is aiming for a global rollout in the latter part of this year. This is the point. So they're building this infrastructure for you to be connected to this singularity from the Google Cloud, connecting with SpaceX and Starlink and all of these systems that this guy and Google are putting in place. These are the technocrats. So we have here, this is how it will work. Google's cloud data center at the top, and this is so this diagram here is cybernetics. This is exactly what this is, and they study cybernetics and invert it. It's the study of systems. Google Cloud's data center at the top links to Starlink satellites that link to Google's cloud data center that link to all devices connected to Starlink, including Azure users. The actual people, they're telling you there. They're not even... people will go, well, yeah, I'm a user. No, they mean you, actually you. And that's basically what it's got to be. You're going to be attached, inserted into this cybernetic system as a thing in the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies. Elon Musk announced his new search engine, Truth GPT, to challenge Google and Bing. No, he doesn't. You've just seen there. He's been he's been funded by Google. They're all in it together. They're giving you false options, and they're setting up false, fake WWE style wrestling stories where they all battle each other, but they don't. Again, I talked about this guy last week, Anthony Lewandowski, and his Way of the Future, a now defunct church founded in 2017 by former Uber engineer Anthony Lewandowski, who was charged by the Department of Justice for stealing self-driving car trade secrets. That was just a way of getting him in prison and then getting him desperate enough to get under, to be controlled. And then pardoned by Donald Trump in 2021. Of course he was. Of course he was pardoned by Donald Trump. That's the point. Because he was pardoned on the behest of Peter Thiel, who now funds J.D. Vance and previously funded Donald Trump. So now, as I mentioned in the last episode, or maybe the episode before, this messianic sect, Chabad Lubavitch, have a guy called Anthony Lewandowski who has a cult who are trying to create an AI godhead. And that's what he calls it, an AI godhead. Lewandowski was indicted on 33 federal charges. Again, 33 is a Freemasonic number. Alleged theft of self-driving car trade secrets. In August 2020, Lewandowski pled guilty to one of the 33 charges. Just one. One will do. Don't matter. And was sentenced to 18 months in prison. And he was pardoned less than 6 months later on January 20th, 2021, the last day of Donald Trump's presidency, when he didn't pardon Julian Assange. He's so free speech. Julian Assange or Edward Snowden, but did pardon a guy who runs an AI cult, Anthony Lewandowski, and Jared Kushner's crooked dad. And Jared Kushner is part of this Chabad Lubavitch cult as well. So they want to build an AI godhead. So what is a godhead in Judaism? Godhead refers to the aspect of substratum of God that lies behind God's actions or properties, i.e., it is the essence of God. So it's the core of God. And its nature has been the subject of long debate in every major religion. Terminology. The closest corresponding term in the classical and modern languages of Jewish scholarship is Elohot, meaning deity, essentially nature of God or divinity. Max Kudishin notes that the plural Elohim gods must not be confused with Elohot God. The latter is used with reference to the God. So we all know Elohim was gods, and he did say, let us go down there and confuse their language. So he isn't on his own in terms of this, guys, and you think they're aliens or you want to think they're beings from another reality. Well, there's clearly clues in there to say there's more than one. But Elohut is the godhead. They want to build an AI godhead to insert into their Solomon's temple because these guys are lunatics. Now, this is the reset button. Again, remember, signs and symbols. This is how they operate and communicate to each other. So the circle means no end, no beginning. It's eternal, everlasting. And the dot in the middle usually means the nomad or God. So by having a circle with a dot in the middle, what you're saying is you're going to reset God by literally pressing it and resetting it. That's exactly what it is. But if you look on this image, it goes back the other way. This is anti-clockwise. This is from this is about the Great Reset. So that's one of their images. But it's going the other way. So they're resetting it. And it's exactly what they want to do, is reset God. And this is the Tower of Babel situation that we're in. So here's another one about the point and the circle. So remember, if we understand these sign symbols, colours, shapes, and we understand the sound and especially dates as well, we understand what they're going to do, and we can just completely dismantle their language, as God apparently did, whatever you think of that, is with the Tower of Babel. We can take down their Tower of Babel by just understanding the language of how they communicate with each other, and it's so blatantly obvious. That's why communicating this stuff to your friends and family is so important, because it's everywhere, and once you see it everywhere, and it's quite clear, and they have to stick to that language. They're not creative people, although they might want to pretend they are. They're not creative people. They can't differ from this language. So once you decipher this, you understand their code, they are screwed, and they know we're getting very close to enough of us starting to understand this stuff. The point is like the ruling sun in astrology. It is the base from which everything exists or not. Everyone who has drawn a circle knows that this center point must exist for its construction. This middle point stands for centralized power, the base or heart of all energy. In a transferal sense, it is God, the cosmic consciousness and enlightenment. The symbol of the circle, in a general sense, stands for oneness, wholeness, unity, eternity, perfection, and infinity. Life without beginning or end, balance, and the cosmos. And the dot in the middle is God. And by the Great Reset logo themselves, they want to reset God and this reality and build it up in their own image. And that's exactly what transhumanism is. So let's just go back to the promise that they believe that God has to keep. So they're building their technocratic Tower of Babel at the moment with all of these guys and this messianic agenda and Solomon's temple, the AI godhead in there with the Ark of the Covenant and the monatomic gold in there, broadcasting this stuff out to the rest of the world through Starlink satellites and Google Cloud. That's basically what they want, straight into your brain. So we were talking last night on a podcast I was on, actually, and someone come up with the concept, and I agree with them, that the whole Project Bluebeam was going to be something out there to try and convince a lot of people. I think this is going to hold back a bit and be something that's straight into your mind. And this data pooling by places like Peter Thiel's Palantir and In-Q-Tel are trying to figure out what you will believe. What would you buy? What are your hopes and what are your wishes? So they can give you that to trick you into doing these things. So you might have an individual image of what you actually see straight into your mind if you're connected to this AI cult system. So in the book of Genesis, chapter 9, we are told of the covenant God made with Noah and with every living creature. I know we've said this, but I just want to repeat it. After the great flood, the Lord set the rainbow in the sky as a sign of the covenant, a symbol of his promise to never again would the waters cover the earth entirely. And God declared that this sign of the rainbow in the sky would be a reminder of God's promise. And there was the second rainbow over the top, which was a affirmation of that, or reaffirming of that, outside Buckingham Palace, which was clearly engineered. So they believe, I believe, my theory is that they believe that God can't go back on his promise, and they've kind of outsmarted God here with this new system. So I hope you got a lot of information from that, and the pieces are starting to come together. I know they are for me, of what these guys are doing. You're starting to understand the language of which they speak. Again, is the way to stop them and tear down their Tower of Babel. Once we start to understand what they're actually doing and telling each other about it, their language becomes obsolete and it's no longer secretive, and we can warn each other. Remember, like, if someone knew about the Feast of Fools, on January the 6th, would all those people have gone there? And Donald Trump's getting his own people locked up. He would have been sitting back and watching that happen, thinking that people are fools. And if we would have known what the Feast of Fools was on January the 6th, we could have warned people not to go on that day. This is how important this information is. Enjoy the interview coming up now, and I will speak to you in a week's time. Remember to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Take care. Goodbye. Hi guys, welcome to this week's Classified here on Ickonic.com. I'm here with Tony Arterburn. I think we've done an interview together maybe years ago now, or maybe 2 or 3 years, even 4 or 5 years ago. We've definitely been on some kind of podcast together where we're all on it, and there's loads of us. But I'm not sure we spoke. I maybe think we spoke once, maybe a few years back. And Tony's a former US Army trooper, a paratrooper, and world champion powerlifter, which you can tell once he stood up there and moved his lamp. You could tell he was and he talks about, now he's the founder and CEO of Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Exchange. Now, guys, I can't profess to know much about economy. I am good with the conspiracy stuff. I can tell you all about Habad Lubavitch. I can tell you all about the Knights Templar and go way back to all these other conspiracies and, the Babylonian towers and stuff. But what I'm not very good at when it comes to is currency and understanding what it actually means if the dollar, being the reserve currency, collapses. What does it mean, Tony? And I know this is, for someone like yourself, this may sound like you're like I'm a little bit simple, but bear with me. For someone who doesn't know what the reserve currency, what does that even mean?
Well, in 1944, after the Bretton Woods Conference, this is the tail end of World War II, as you know, the dollar became the world reserve currency. It was decided that that was the meeting where they had the birth of the World Bank, the IMF, and gold was pegged at $35 an ounce. And that was meant to stabilize in a post-World War II world where countries had cross-border payments and settlement systems, and it would all be done in dollars. And of course, that supplanted the British pound sterling. The British pound sterling was the gold standard until it wasn't. And of course, it was the British that had the gold standard in the 19th century that really paved the way for the modern gold standard economy, and it was very successful. It was only the beginning of World War I and then leading into World War II that the British Empire went off the gold standard pretty much completely. And of course, Winston Churchill tried to put it back on as the Chancellor of the Exchequer during the 30s. It was a big failure because they'd expanded the money supply so vastly that it was hard to peg it back to gold. So where we are now, since 1971, the entire world is inside of an experiment. It's never been done before. Richard Nixon took the United States dollar off the gold standard, breaking the Bretton Woods Agreement, August 15th, 1971. Ironically, for those of us who study conspiracy, he interrupted an episode of Bonanza, which is a show it's about going out west and finding gold and silver. So I thought that was kind of ironic. That's what he interrupted on a Sunday night here in the United States in 1971. But since that time, what you're watching, and again, is an experiment where a fiat currency, and fiat means by decree, backed by nothing, and especially since we lost the United States just lost the petrodollar, which is and again, for those of us who study alternative history, hidden history, and look into the military-industrial complex, it's very odd that we would just allow the petrodollar to lapse. That was the 50-year agreement we had with the Saudis, where they would only denominate oil transactions in dollars. right now that agreement has lapsed and they're starting to replace the dollar. So what you're watching is a currency backed by nothing, which isn't money. Money and currency are two different things. They can be the same, but most of the time in the modern era, they're very different. Money has to have an intrinsic value, like gold has value unto itself, or silver has industrial uses unto itself, or even Bitcoin. It's a representation of proof of work. Again, fiat currency just by decree. So they've expanded the money supply, Richard, to a place where it's unsustainable. Here in the United States, 80% of all the dollars ever created in the history of the United States were made in the last 5 years. Our debt, I don't know if you know about the United States debt clock or what's happening, but it took us 200 years to go $1 trillion into debt. And now we do that every 90 days. So about the time I was born, the tail end of 1979, the debt of the United States was $1 trillion. And now we do that every 90 days. Actually, we're doing it faster. I probably need to revamp my statistics, because I think it was like closer to like 2 trillion in the past 90 days. So that is, again, the wheels are off. It's accelerating. The debt to GDP is just I think it's like 130%. And climbing, and the rest of the world is following. You have close to $350 trillion in debt worldwide. Supposedly, you have 400 trillion in assets. I don't believe that. I don't believe that there's. I think that what it is inflated. Again, currencies, the stock market. So much of it's based on fake, and really, if what got me into studying the history of money was my tour in Iraq. And I was, part of the tail end of the invasion of Iraq. That was my third foreign war. And the first thing they do when I got to Mosul is they sent us to the bank, and they said, there's a disturbance at the bank. Go to the bank, figure out of course we didn't even know what was going on. They just, figure stuff out. And so we go to the bank, and there's people running out with boxes of Iraqi dinar, and no one's stopping them. And the bank tellers are just kind of confused. Nobody knows. And they're trying to go out and like trade with them, but nobody wants them. I got to see a paper currency die in real time.
Right.
And that's because after the invasion, you have these, Iraqi dinar with Saddam Hussein's picture on them. So there was a temporary window where they just weren't worth anything. You couldn't trade them, but they did trade in US dollars. And I always tell this story because now, this is how fast de-dollarization has happened, Richard. You fast forward now 20 years on, and it's illegal to trade in dollars in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like you can't bank in them. They don't want dollars. Again, they want to get away from that. They just are applying for the BRICS status, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now Saudi Arabia. So I think what's happening, and a lot of people don't realize, and because we grew up in this post, World War II Bretton Woods system, and I think it's easy to get normalcy bias. Like, here's the dollar. It's what's traded around the world. It's what people, because we chase these green pieces of paper, and that's, Babylonian money magic. That's why we do it. It's just basic economic alchemy. So we're chasing these fake things, but again, the more you chase them, the more you try to stack them, the more they lose value. And that's a game that is completely rigged against you, because the wealthy don't hoard cash. Like the super elite don't hoard cash. They don't want cash. They have assets. Mm-hmm. They use debt. And so everything is kind of turned. It's an inverse of the way that like the United States was founded on sound money. It was founded on a bimetallic system that lasted really until 1933. A lot of people don't realize too, and I talk about the 19th century is really important to note that the British Empire made the gold standard possible. The United States followed the British Empire. It was really, and we had a bimetallic system, but I can talk a little bit about our politics in the 19th century, but you had a gold standard. 1879 in the United States was really when we codified that. And of course, you get the politics of William Jennings Bryan. I don't know if you know about this, the Cross of Gold speech, and that's where you get the allegory of the Wizard of Oz. That's why you have the yellow brick road, and the Emerald Palace is the greenback, and the character is supposed to be William Jennings Bryan as the Cowardly Lion, and he speaks out against the gold standard and talks about free silver. Well, in the book, Dorothy clicks her silver slippers, not her ruby slippers, in the L. Frank Baum's book. So it's an allegory on the gold standard and populism. So we were having that debate, like, about increasing the money supply through silver, not necessarily fiat currency, but through silver to help people because our currency was so strong, it was deflationary, it was hard to get out of debt. So throughout the 19th century, there was no inflation. So like if you went to see George Washington's inaugural and you bought a suit, and then again you paid that whatever you paid for it, in 1905 it would cost the same.
Yeah.
It's like all through that another 100+ years it would cost the same, and the reason is because we didn't have a fiat currency and we had a bimetallic system. So inflation was just adjusted. Again, we might have an increase in a little bit of increase in the gold supply, but goods and services caught up with it. So there was just no inflation. So across the board, we act like that's normal now. Inflation is not normal. We should be living in a deflationary system. Prices should be going down, Richard, not going up, for innovation and other things. So we're living really, it's an upside down world when it comes to inflation, it comes to currency. And if people don't really understand that the reason they throw out these terms like Great Reset, they have to reset it.
Yeah.
They have to turn it off and turn it back on again. Because the numbers are just, again, math doesn't care about your politics or your feelings or anything. You're going to run out of runway. And that's what's happening around the world. So at the same time, we're losing the status with the United States dollar. Other countries are preparing. And that's what I think the BRICS nations are doing. They're preparing for a reset in all across the board in commodities, resetting like gold, silver, copper, petroleum. It's the world is going through, and this is and something that we study, but they are completing the Great Reset. We're inside the 2030 agenda, and it has the dollar is on the chopping block, and unfortunately, that's going to cause a lot of pain for people that don't know it's coming.
It really, when you talk about the Great Reset there, obviously there's other elements of being resetting what it means to be human. I just wanted to just a quick question before I get into that is, so am I right in thinking that when you said it was a gold reserve and they would print money per ounce, they had to have a certain amount of gold reserve to be able to print the money, and now there is no gold reserves and they just print it anyway? Is that pretty much what it is?
That's pretty much what it is. And of course, the United States was set up in the Constitution. Only Congress could coin money, and it had to be gold and silver. We didn't have a central bank from 1836 to 1913. The second bank of the United States, which, there was two different factions in the United States. There was the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. And the Anti-Federalist didn't believe in a central bank or centralization. So that's where you get the lineage of Andrew Jackson. And he hated the banksters. I mean, he said they were a den of vipers and thieves. He's going to rout them out. And he killed the second bank of the United States. He said, I want it on my tombstone. I killed the bank. He's very much loathed the banksters. So it took, and then again, J.P. Morgan was born in 1837 and he died in 1913. So his lifespan was between the two banks. So we had, the second bank of the United States was no more. So in between that time, you could issue fractional reserve, like banks would issue notes and things like that. But basically, if it's coming from the government, it was coined. You had $20 gold pieces, you had silver dollars. Temporarily, Lincoln created notes directly from the Treasury. Side note, there was only two presidents in history that ever created notes directly from the Treasury. One was Abraham Lincoln, and the other one was John F. Kennedy, and they were both shot in the head in public to channel Jim Mars, who I saw give that talk once, and I thought that was something interesting. I mean, you don't have to agree with their presidencies or what they stood for exactly, but there is something weird about that. And JFK had what executive order 01111, I think, where he was going to issue silver certificates directly from the Treasury, redeemable in silver as dollars. I have some of those certificates that flow through my shop. So yeah, you had to have at least a semblance, Richard. So we all know that governments are corrupt and people. That's history. Just is one long lesson in that. The thing about having a gold standard, though, is that you can only get away with so much corruption because eventually you have to account for it. That's why they took all the governors off, like all the safety measures are off with a fiat currency. Like if we were on a gold standard, Donald Rumsfeld can't show up on September 10th, 2001 and say he lost $2.3 trillion. It would be impossible. because you'd have to have some account. There'd have to be every dollar's measured. But when you have a fiat system, it just print it, and it's like in this country, in the United States, I mean, it's kind of stupid that we even have taxes, is because they're just going to print. They don't collect revenue to run the government. They just create more currency. And by the way, most governments do, if not all of them, right now. They just expand the money supply. The United States, though, especially, and the reason we've been able to get away with so much is because other parts of the world use the dollar so much. 80% of all the $100 bills that have ever been made are not in the U.S. So 80% of those $100 bills that ever been made are floating around in the world out there. That keeps our currency strong enough and attractive enough not to have a serious loss in purchasing power. And unfortunately, for those who aren't paying attention, de-dollarization is happening so rapidly that the loss of purchasing power is going to accelerate faster than I think we've ever seen before. And a lot of those, I mean, a big chunk of those dollars are getting repatriated. They're coming home. And when they do, we're going to have a real problem here in the U.S. And that's why I think they've run the simulations. And I think the elite or the Davos set and all those, that crowd, the globalists, I think they know that, and they're running the simulations. And that's why they call for a great reset. It's most likely to protect themselves from peasants with pitchforks when we figure out that their system collapsed.
Yeah, I think it was one of the Rothschilds said if they ever figure out what we've done, we're done for. So they're
Yes.
looking for something else to back it off then by the sounds of it. Now, and I know you would have heard of this, the cryptocurrency system using body activity data of Microsoft Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Zero
The zero
six zero
six zero
six
six.
one. Yeah, yeah. So this is a system, and I know you guys probably know about this, but I want to kind of put these things through Tony, who knows a lot more about this. So it's a body activity system. Have you ever seen the Black Mirror one where they're on there's the stationary bikes and they're
Yes.
biking? It's basically rats on a wheel. They're going to use your biometric data for you to mine for cryptocurrency. Now, for someone like me, obviously they're trying to find another gold standard, and obviously there's a slither of gold in every human being, apparently. So they're trying to find another thing to back the currency off. It seems like that this system means human beings. Is that would be fair to say? How would that system work in your mind?
I remember looking at that. That was really the beginning of 2020. I came across that world patent 060606. Yeah, and it specifically is rewarding you through biometrically through cryptocurrency for. I remember it was approved. I'm putting approved activities. It
Yes, it
was. I
was.
don't know
Yeah.
what that whatever approved activities it was. I remember reading that in the patent. That is interesting. We haven't even touched on central bank digital currencies. Remember that you have, and so what's the theme of what's the UN theme that was turned into the campaign for Joe Biden in 2020 was Build Back Better. Remember that?
Yeah.
It's BBB, it's Build Back Better. And I think it was my friend Charlie Robinson who said, hey, in order to build something back better, you have to destroy it first. And I thought that's what this is. A lot of it's a controlled demolition.
Mm.
The system of cash, even if it's fiat, is still a lot more free than digitized. And they've just done I mean, it's almost like they've looted the treasury. And this is not just the United States, but most countries, central banks around the world, they're all linked together. The Federal Reserve in the United States is not federal. It's not a reserve. It's not even, we just had recently the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said he's not subject to Trump firing him or being replaced by. He just serves unto himself, apparently. And I think, but people like me, we know that. I mean, they're an international banking consortium and cartel, not working for the American people. So they've done such a terrible job, and most of it on purpose. Like I said, a controlled demolition. So if you really want to bring something in, build it back better, you have to destroy the current system. Maybe that's why they have accelerated it. Again, they're not fighting to prop up the old system. They're literally just doing everything they can to destroy the current one. So, my thinking has been, the dream, the holy grail of these psychopaths is to get control of the money supply, but in a digitized way, biometrically tied to you.
Yeah.
It's one thing to quote the Rothschilds about he who controls the British money supply, controls the British Empire. To quote Mayor Amschel Rothschild back in the 19th century, he said, "I control the British money supply." That's a lot different than saying, well, now you have even if it's just CBDC and you have a biometrically activated wallet that's from the United States government or whatever government, they can create it where you can only buy certain things. So, again, approved activities, or your currency will expire, right? And they can expand and contract the money supply in real time. I think that's really what they're trying to do. On one side of the spectrum, I believe, like the BRICS nations, they want to reset all of their commodities, because a lot of commodities against fiat currency right now, I mean, honestly, like it's a magic trick. It should be zero. Like the currencies aren't worth anything, but and we give them value in our mind, so they know that on a long enough timeline that against things like gold, all currencies go to zero. Like gold still is money, and I think they're trying to reevaluate everything that they have. That's why, like, Russia recently said they're going to use silver as a strategic reserve asset, which is huge. I mean, to monetize silver, that hasn't happened in 100+ years. The last people to do that, last government, was the pre-communist Chinese that had silver as like their stabilized currency asset. So it's a long way to say, I think what they're trying to do simultaneously is reset commodities and bring in digitized CBDC, central bank digital currency. And whether it's something like the Microsoft patent, or I think it's going to be biometric, but that means it's really what it is. It's not even money. It's surveillance disguised as money, is really what it is. Here in the US, though, there's been, and I've been talking about this for years, but to see kind of hit mainstream, or even like, there's certain Republican politicians in different states who've introduced anti-CBDC bills. And like the state of Tennessee is working on a gold and silver reserve, accepting gold and silver as legal tender, as something like the dollar. There's a lot of, in different states like Oklahoma, I'm in Texas right now, but Oklahoma is very crypto friendly. I'm not talking about I'm talking about the real crypto, decentralized, not CBDC. No, by the way, nobody wants CBDC. What's so funny about all this, Richard, is like the globalists and the Davos set and all the lizard folk, they really love to centralize, and nobody else does. I mean, you have to be like, the only psychopaths like it, and innovation is happening. Human beings, I think, just historically, like the trend that we're on is on decentralization. You look at the rise of things like Bitcoin. Even if Bitcoin, I've been a fan of Bitcoin since 2016. A lot of people present evidence to me, say, "Oh, the Bitcoin's an op. It was created by such and such." I'm like, well, if it was, it's a terrible idea, because it woke millions of people up to what fiat currency is. So maybe it had a blowback effect, if that is even true. So I see a lot of good things on the horizon because I'm plugged into this space. And I think there's a level of, like, we're reaching a level of consciousness, because it's like, if the dollar stayed the same, it was the same as when we were kids, or the pound sterling was the same as we were kids. It's not. I mean, you can tell it doesn't buy as much. Why is that? It's because they expanded the money supply. They have to pay for all their failures. They don't want to rein in their fiscal house. They don't want to have a budget, because that would mean that you had to use your brain or compromise or have character. So we don't do that anymore. In the United States, we used to have big debates on what stuff costs. We don't do that anymore. Nobody cares. That's like, the wheels are off. We're $35 trillion in debt. Who cares? And that's really the attitude that I see. The politicians don't talk about it anymore. So we're in I think, the vicinity of history where there's going to be massive change. And I do think that the cult at the top of the pyramid, they definitely want to create a centralized one world currency system through CBDC, or run it through things like the Bank of International Settlements, or the IMF with Unicoin, or whatever they're doing. But people in general, like people that I run into, people that I talk to, the folks that I see, and the articles that I read, and the intelligence that I'm plugged into, I see just massive pushback. Nigeria is a great example. Nigeria adopted Bitcoin years ago. Like they love it. People love it. They trade in it all the time. It's something that's been very good for Nigeria as a stable currency and rising in value. And this is so the banksters said, well, this is a great area for us to test our CBDC plan. So they came in and they gave the Nigerians CBDC, and they hated it. They like Bitcoin. Why didn't they like central bank digital currency? And it was a complete flop. I mean, it literally just like nobody used it. And the reason is because they're like, why would we trust something that is infinite when I know how many Bitcoin there are? There's 21 million Bitcoin there'll ever be. Period. Can't make more. Can't counterfeit them. Again, and there's really, if you look at the actual charts, there's about 5 million that are just never going to be recovered. So it's about 16 million Bitcoin, 16 million Bitcoin that it will ever be. So there's a supply shock there. How many dollars will there ever be? The answer is more, right? And so it's same thing with every currency on earth, but it's not backed by anything. They'll just make more. So that's what the difference is between decentralization and centralization. Decentralization focuses on finite. There's only so much gold, there's only so much silver. That scarcity creates value. Same thing with Bitcoin. And then in a fiat world, it's just ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And that creates a loss of value. And that's pretty simple. I think most people can recognize that.
I think a lot of people, main concern is obviously one, it's a completely new system. So unless you get your head around it, if you're 88 years old, you're not going to understand Bitcoin too much, and you're not going to, that's not for now. People can't get their head around the technology part of it. And I know I struggle with that. I remember the Canadian truckers and someone came along and gave them a certain amount of money of Bitcoin in a brown like a envelope, and they had a code on there for their wallet, but then they were frozen out of they were frozen out of those accounts. So they were given funds, but then they were frozen. And I think a lot of people worry about that. How do you off ramp this finance into physical things like buying food? I think a lot of people don't understand that or are concerned about, okay, I might have all this Bitcoin in there, but how do I get that out and literally live with this thing that's just numbers on a screen, really?
Yeah, there's levels of understanding about things like Bitcoin. Like right now on my phone, I've got something called an Exodus wallet. It's free. You can download it. It's Exodus. You recognize or remember, you write down your 12 seed phrases. So they'll give you 12 words. And then have to be in sequential order. You write those down. That's your wallet. I mean, technically, based off the program, nobody else but me can enter that wallet. It can't be seized. And you can even take stuff like Bitcoin and put it on a hardwire cold storage outside of the entire system. You can put it on like a disk. That's just yours. It's not even plugged into the web. So there's levels of security. Like if you have it on an exchange, that's a problem. Your exchange account can be closed, like the exchange itself, or if you're trying to take Bitcoin and turn it into the currency that, whatever country you're in, that's an off ramp. That can be a problem. What you would want to do is figure out, how do I trade with somebody that accepts Bitcoin, like direct peer to peer? That would be completely outside the system. Or how do I take Bitcoin and maybe buy some silver coins, and I take those silver coins and I use those in the real world to, in the third dimension to buy physical things. There's ways to it's not easy, but there's ways to get around it. Like, if you got a gold coin, and to me, like if you say, hey, Tony, what's your favorite cash? Like, what would you accept? I want gold or silver. And if you got a 1 ounce gold coin in your hand, that's $2,800 worth of value today. Just 1 ounce, just one coin is 2,700 some change, approximately, just based off the spot price today. I know how liquid that is. To me, I'm going to take the gold anytime over cash, because I know I can turn that in, I can trade it. And as the currency of wherever I am is going down in value and losing purchasing power, because they are, I'm going to be stabilized. Gold and silver aren't not really investments, Richard. What they are is their money. Even the old bankster J.P. Morgan said gold is credit, right? Or gold is money, everything else is credit. And he was kind of right. And today it's gold is money, gold and silver are money, everything else is debt. And that's where we are. It's not even based off credit anymore. Everything is completely inverted in debt. So, to me, there's several ways you can be outside of the system. It just takes a little bit of self education and working with people that also accept things that are outside of the system that would be considered money. And I think you'll see that that's a trend that is really accelerating. I'm excited to see it.
I think something that I've kind of thought about and concerned about myself is if someone, say, locked out the system. Look at the Chinese, obviously, social credit system there. Someone's locked out the system. We had this in World War Two with, don't help the Jewish folk at the time, the faith, the Jewish faith. And if you did, were seen to helping them, then you would be in trouble. Would you get to these people that are locked out the system? If you're caught trading with them, then you could be locked out too. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm looking at it from
Yes.
all angles that might not make any sense at all. I'm just asking you questions because I don't quite understand it. But these are concerns that maybe other people would have if I was, say, locked out of the system because I would done nothing that is in the normal world, but with your digital ID, you've dropped below a certain score of compliance because they're basically what they're doing is they're using instead of gold, they're using compliance as their currency. It's a
Right.
compliance system. The more compliant you are, the more money you'll have, which is pretty much now because that's when you get wealthy is you basically scam everyone out of everything and you'll get wealthy and be a right rotten person because we live in an upside down world. But what they're trying to do is be more compliant to the system. We will give you more freedoms. That's basically, I think, what it is. So it's a compliance system,
Right.
compliance currency. But if you're not compliant enough and you get locked out of the system, will other people chance being trading with you to be tracked? Because that's what I worry. We get to a certain point where they're watching everything and you've got chips in you and stuff, and then there's an issue. We need to cut this off, I think, at a certain level. What is your kind of take on where we're going down in road in terms of technology and transhumanism alongside this Bitcoin technology?
Well, that is the danger. I mean, you've got great technologies like Bitcoin. I think they're interesting. They're teaching you about decentralization. They're teaching you about how the fiat system works because it's antithetical. It's like the opposite. In the Greek mythology, you would have a hubris that would be followed by nemesis, right? Nemesis would be the destroyer, kind of like on Ghostbusters when they send the giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right? So that's what I think to the answer to fiat currency and the system that's been set up right now that we're living in this experiment. One of the things that came up, and that's Bitcoin. The other thing is the rise of gold, like back in the really in the forefront of what constitutes a world reserve currency. It's really gold now, and the dollar is still hanging on. The euro was just supplanted. They were second place as the reserve currency held by central banks, and now it's gold. Number one is the dollar. So, to go back and you talk about the central bank digital currencies and, this Chinese social credit score, the model is China. Don't forget the trilateralists, the globalists, the CFR, all these the internationalist automatons for Satan. They love this stuff. I mean, the test models, they love Justin Trudeau is like, I just really like the Chinese a lot. He's really happy to see, their totalitarian system. Um, I see what they're doing. I know what they're modeling, but at the same time, again, you see, like I went to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville this year in July, and Trump spoke there, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Edward Snowden and others. There's just so much momentum in the space that is outside of what is like nobody there at the Bitcoin conference is going to accept a CBDC. Nobody. So they're going to build something that no one wants. And yeah, you can build this stuff all you want. It reminds me of there's a Twilight Zone episode, the original one from back in the early 1960s, and they have this episode where these guys rob a bank, and they go off and they're with a mad scientist. He's going to be able to cryogenically put them in stasis for 100 years, and they wake up and it's 100 years later. They go try to take the gold out of the cave. And anyway, that's kind of the ironic ending at the end when they're like laying there dying because basically they all kill each other. And the one that's got all the gold bars left. And the guy shows up and it's 100 years in the future. And he says, oh, he's like, I guess he's got some gold. They used to use that as money and it's not worth anything anymore. Like in the future. That's an interesting like thought experiment, but I promise you, I've read extensively on the history of gold and silver and what just part of our human story. It's never going away. So I don't care if they build some digital prison grid with social credit score. The human condition, whatever it is with us and our story, we will always find value in precious metals. And because they exist in the third dimension, because it can be jewelry, you can use it to put a filling in your teeth. You can make a watch with it. It's just always going to be a store of value for us. And if you understand that, then you can always trade outside of the system. It's kind of, there's no tracking system on gold. There never will be. Whether I mine gold in South Africa or Mexico or in Nevada in the United States or Russia, you can't tell where it's from. Gold is gold. And so I think that we're definitely in a maximum danger area with the technocracy. And we have to continue to like do what you do and David Icke does and just really talk about, really expose what their plan is, because if we can understand what they're doing and push back against it, even if they do implement it, it may be dead on arrival. That's the hope, is that they try to do this technocracy and it just blows up in their face, which I would really love to see that. Because they've been dead wrong on so much, and they can run the simulations all they want, but human nature, like Yuval Harari at the World Economic Forum thinks that man is a hackable animal. No, I don't believe that. If you've ever really dug into history and seen the human story, man is not a hackable animal. And I think that that's the philosophy that we're fighting about, being just a trousered ape versus a spiritual being or having value. That's really what we're up against. And the 20th century, the construct was freedom and capitalism versus godless communism. At least that's the construct, right? It's more complicated than that. But I think in the 21st century, it'll just be humanity versus those who believe that humanity is not essential. And those two things will have it out, the thesis and antithesis. And so I'm more optimistic. I do think if you just if you can educate yourself and learn about how to use precious metals and look into certain cryptocurrencies that are, I think, have a huge upside and advantage, especially I only really deal in Bitcoin. There are some great cryptos, but the thing about Bitcoin is it doesn't track back to a CEO. There's no company, there's no country. It is, and I don't think you could ever create one again like it. It is very unique in the sense that no one, like I know, like you can drill down and find out who runs Ethereum, right? He comes out all the time and he shows you he's the CEO, or other cryptos, but you don't know who started Bitcoin. That's the mystery, and I think something like that to use, and it's a basket of things. It could be gold and silver. It's whatever's outside of the system is what you would want to start working on. As they roll out the CBDCs.
It's really interesting with the gold thing. It's almost like it's been dropping hints. You had the whole Anunnaki story of they come here to mine gold, and whether that's real or not is another issue. But the fact that there's a value, an intrinsic universal value to gold, and it seems like an alchemical principle that this was the one substance that you could make anything out of, and it couldn't be destroyed. There's the monatomic gold, and I'm sure you've heard of monatomic gold, and it's
Yes.
the gold that gives you the elixir of life, and it's what they put in the Ark of the Covenant to make it a particle accelerator and broadcaster, which are got to do in Solomon's Temple by the looks of it, these lunatics, which Trump is one of them, and RFK is involved, unfortunately, as well with these Shabbat lot. But they understand the value of what can be done. So what do you think it about gold that gives it such universal, infinite value? It seems like something that we just don't quite understand yet.
I certainly don't understand it. And I've read extensively on it. It's just what I do. But you dig into the past and it's in our legends, it's in our history, it's in our lore. There's a longing for it. I remember when I was a kid, there was one of my favorite movies I watched in theaters. It's with Anthony Hopkins called The Edge. and he plays this billionaire who gets stranded out in the Pacific Northwest. He's chased by a bear and all this stuff, and he's trying to figure out how to catch a fish, and he has a cuff link or something, and he bends it because gold is very malleable, and he bends it into a hook. And this is like in the late 90s, and he holds it up and he says, gold. He's like, the whole world longs for it. And I remember that line when I was a kid, and I thought, I wonder why. Why does the whole world long for it? Is it just because it represents wealth? It represents work, energy. There's something to it. It just pulls humanity. And again, I can't really explain it, but it's a very finite resource. I'll give you an example and just throw some figures out there. Supposedly, in all the history of the world, there's been about 151,000 tons of gold ever mined. So, in the entire history of everything that we know of, more steel is poured in 1 hour on this planet than all the gold that's ever been mined. It's a very finite thing. It's not, it's why it's precious. It's a precious metal. It's hard to get, it's hard to refine. It takes a lot of work. It represents work. So, what is it about gold? I don't, because we have a certain amount of gold in our body, like you mentioned, monatomic gold. And, was the powdered monatomic gold, was that the philosopher's stone? Is that what creates anti-gravity or anything like? There's more to the story there. The same thing with silver, and silver has in our lore about, and it's what kills werewolves and vampires and other things, like it affects evil. It's supposed to kill evil. And of course, it's really silver is it's like for burns and things like that, or antibacterial, antimicrobial. Nothing beats silver. Like high grade silver is what's used in hospitals. Like you can take colloidal silver and spray it in your nose, especially if you're going around playing, which the flu season or whatever. It kills things. So it has a lot of usage outside of just being monetary. Like, it has the jewelry, it has all that stuff. There's just something about it. If you read the Bible, it's, I read like 2 pages of the Bible every day, just because for the history, for the insight, and it's part of Western civilization. And it's mentioned, gold and silver are in there all the time. It's mentioned over and over and over again. So it's just something. Richard, that's a great question. I wish I could answer it. Whether it's the Zachariah Sitchin story of the Anunnaki needing it for their atmosphere or something, like it's just ingrained in us to find it, to use it. It will never go away. I don't care. You can have all these modern economists say whatever and then talk about the modern monetary theory. It's not. It's this. There's an actual law it's called Gresham's law, and it says that when bad money enters a system, good money goes into hiding. So when a fake currency enters a system, people use it, and then gold is no longer used inside of that system. It's outside of it, and it waits for it to implode, and then gold comes back in. So gold always comes back. Gold always outlasts these experiments. It has over and over again. I mean, if you dig up, a settlement for where the Roman Empire had troops stationed or whatever, and you find those old coins. Well, if you find a gold one, guess what? It's worth gold. It's still got value. Those Roman coins, I've bought them. They still have value. But nobody dives to the bottom of the ocean to get a treasure chest full of cash, because nobody cares. Like they go for the pirate treasure, right? They go for the gold.
It's such a fascinating topic, isn't it? And I think this is when it comes to alchemy and these understandings of the mystery schools, that they know that it does something that we don't. I think Monatomic Gold is one of the first books I ever read and it dealt with monatomic gold, and it was about the farmer who first created it or found it, or he wasn't the first person, but refound it, I suppose. And you say like it's the reserve currency, the reserve part of it. It seems like it steps back what you were just saying then, lets the world kind of almost like implode itself and goes, all right, I'll come back in now, you can use me again. And it holds itself kind of
Yes.
still there in reserve for when we mess things up with our new Tower of Babel, and pull it down on our own head, which they're about to do with this technology stuff. I just think, I mean, I love what you do, because it's all well pulling out the conspiracies and everything of this, but everybody, they do need answers and practical answers, and everybody wants to feed their family. So it's not going to collapse overnight. How do you see the current system kind of gradually collapsing? It seems you say it's controlled demolition. Like, how do you see maybe in the next 20 years of it slowly kind of being switched over to a digital system, because it's controlled, this demolition, it's not going to fall down overnight, or there would be absolute carnage, and you say we'd be all at their, we would be at the black nobility's doors, banging on the doors for our money back. But how do they going to
Right.
control this demolition, do you see?
I think they'll definitely the United States will point and say it's the other. They did it. It was Russia. It was China. We have these adversaries. There's de-dollarization. We're so good. Look how can they have done this to us? Now we have to make concessions, but we're all in this together. So download your digital wallet, and you'll be so many credits in there. Those dollars, like I said, 65%, I'll get those some more figures. 65% of all the paper notes ever made are not in the United States. So if they're dollars, paper notes, they're not here. They're outside circulating in the globe. Like I said, 80% of all the $100 bills. Those dollars will come home. Okay. They'll be repatriated. It won't be tomorrow, won't be next month, but we're watching a trend. And if you look at like the beginning of the 21st century, about 80% of all the transactions that went on financially went on in dollars. Now we're at about 42%, especially after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the sanctions that were put on. And the Russians just said, fine, we don't even accept dollars anymore. They called them candy wrappers. We don't want them. That's a real insult in Russian. So we don't want these dollars anymore. They started trading directly with like brokering deals outside of sanctions, like with India, just going like gold for crude or whatever. And I think what you're just going to find is it's not like going to be the Chinese yuan is not going to replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Gold is, and they're just going to use these, payment systems and cross-border payment systems to get out of the dollar so that they can't be sanctioned. So the West is slowly losing its foothold, its stranglehold on, the dominating, having that hegemonic dominance financially, militarily over the world. It's what Biden's famously said, there's going to be a new world order out there. What he's talking about is the liberal new world order started after World War II. And that's coming to an end. So Richard, I think really the short answer is as de-dollarization continues, it will become more apparent. It'll be so glaring that we have to have something's wrong with the currency. And they will start looking at ways to mitigate the fault. They may have to try to tie it to something. Trump and even RFK Jr. At the Bitcoin conference, we're talking about making Bitcoin a reserve asset for the United States, and having up to like 20% of the world's Bitcoin supply is really interesting, just especially being in this space since 2016, where that had seemed unthinkable, where somebody of that stature would be talking like that. So we're in a new era, and I think the ruling class knows it, that the game is over. Now it's everything's done but the crying, like they're going to have to reset it. That's why they call it a great reset. I can't stop that. I can't do anything about it. I just try to help people ride the wave, and it's going to happen. I think, again, controlled demolition, those who have the golden parachutes will take them, and you should be paying attention on how you can be outside of it as the best that you can. They'll use the opportunity to implement central bank digital currency. Definitely the Trump victory here this last week is going to be, I don't know if what it messes with the timeline at all. He's supposedly against CBDC, but Jared Kushner worked on them. So, take that with a grain of salt. I don't know that it messes up the Great Reset timeline at all, actually, but it definitely may come in a different form. So you have to look out for the technocracy, like the Elon Musk, the Peter Thiel, Silicon Valley, PayPal mafia guys. They are technocrats, and as you mentioned, technocracy knows no party. You still have to be very cautious moving forward, but finding out how to be outside of the system for yourself, I mean, even if it's just a little bit, how to get supply of precious metals and where to find value. So anything that exists in the third dimension, as they found out in the Weimar Republic at the end of going into the early 1930s, before the rise of Hitler, they had hyperinflation. And I think somebody bought a hotel for a gold coin once. I mean, it's just like there was no yeah, just because value was off the charts. Like, there was nothing pegged to anything, so the currency completely collapsed. They had to replace the Deutschmark. And anyway, it's something I think that we'll have to deal with here in some form or fashion, but they'll be, looking to implement their system on top of that as kind of a fallback or whatever. We just have to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think the UK and obviously the Western world's getting kind of pummeled, and that's where it's going to be. And I don't know if a lot of people understand this, but when you look into the biblical text, and remember these guys are messianic guys, like the likes of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, RFK is involved with these guys. They have a messianic leaning, so they look to the biblical text. So you say you read a couple of pages a day and kind of maybe try and bring that about. And one of the things when you look at it is British Israelism. That's why the UK and the US are deeply involved with everything Israel do because they believe they're descendants of the house of David through the tribe of Joshua. And when you look into the biblical texts, it's the tribe of the house of David, so the tribe of Joshua, that are most affected by the tribulations, and they're trying to bring these things about. So that's going to be a financial collapse by the looks of it to me. So when you look into that, that's why I think it's important to look at the biblical text in a different way of looking at it as almost like a playbook. Not saying that's how it was written, but I think they're playing these things out clearly. They are with Solomon's Temple in the Middle East. So we're looking at a collapse in the UK and the US quite clearly pretty soon. Where can anyone who's listening, how does someone start to get into purchasing gold? What does that even look like? What do you do?
What you look at places. I know you're in the UK, so that you definitely have places you can order from. It's hard to do it internationally. Like you can't order from me in the United States or internationally. It's just hard to get through customs and shipping and the complexities of that. I can ship coast to coast everywhere here. I can do, all 50 states, but it's hard to do anything across borders. But certainly, there are in every country, there's a way to buy physical precious metals. And you got to remember, like, you don't have to buy an ounce of gold. You can buy a gram of gold. There's 31 grams in an ounce. Buy an ounce of gold. You're looking at about $115 or whatever that it translates into to pound sterling. You're going to be, again, able to fractionalize that. You can do the same thing with silver. Um, Going back to in the United States, anything before 1965 was 90% silver. So dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars were silver in the United States until 1965. And after that, that's one of the reasons the world took notice that we did that. And it's one of the reasons that we had to go off the gold standard because we were faking it. We debased our currency to expand the money supply to pay for the Vietnam War and the space race and the Cold War, and it was just getting too complicated to rein in the budget. I also just kind of a side note. I always thought it was the calling card of the deep state to put JFK's face on the last silver coin since he wanted silver to remain.
Yeah.
He was the last person to be on a silver coin in the United States. I thought that was, to me, that's just always been like, that's our calling card. They put it on, they put his image on the last silver coin the year after he was murdered. And so the world took notice. It's one of De Gaulle, the president of France, sent over his warships in the 1960s to pick up their gold. And because they realized that, hey, they taken the silver out of their coin. It just happens. If you read history, it's what the Roman Empire did. Every great empire started debasing the currency. Something's wrong. So you can find little deals like that, even in your country. Like you'd be able to pick up, U.S. Pre 1965 silver, and of course the pound sterling, all the you have silver and gold coinage that's British that goes back a long, long time. So you can find physical gold and silver just pretty much anywhere. Just look at you can buy it from an individual.
We have people still come around here looking for scraps, metal scraps and gold scraps around here. They still do that. I don't know if you noticed, I mean, I've just noticed this, that the Statue of Liberty, the flame is gold. The gold, it's not a red flame, it's a gold flame she's holding up. And that's the same flame that they put on Diana's like memorial, and that's the same flame they put on where JFK, this the eternal flame, and it's gold.
Yes.
And I think that the Liberty coin that Trump's just come out with or coming out with, supposedly, has something to do. They know the value of gold. Tony, it's been absolutely Fascinating. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and then the lesson. And I hope, guys, you got a lot out of that. And I've certainly understand far more than I did an hour ago. Where can people
Good.
find you and find your work?
You can go to my website. It's my last name .gold, arterburn.gold. And when you go to arterburn.gold, you'll find everything on my podcast. And then there's a link to my company, which is Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. And we have a membership program. I started this. I did do what other companies don't do. I go after even if you got as low as $50, like we want to sell you precious metals. We got like 1,300 people all over the country in the United States that buy from us automatically. So go check out arterburn.gold. There's a tab there that says buy gold, and you can check out it, even if you just informationally and the podcasts that we put out. And it's all open source. And if you have questions, like you can message me, you can text me. As soon as I can get to it, I will. We're really an educational company, as well as a financial one.
And Tony's been around doing this stuff a very long time, and he's well respected and loved in this community for what he's done and what he's doing. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for speaking to me. And remember to do your own research, come to your own conclusions. See you in a week's time here on Ickonic.com.